The first frosts, awakening to the chill you stir in the dim hush of your thatched cottage. The air thick with the scent of damp earth and lingering smoke from last night's fire. It is late autumn in the year of our Lord 1347. In a quiet village nestled along the frost-kissed banks of the River Thames, where the fields of Cuxham stretch like faded tapestries under a sky heavy with the promise of winter. Your straw pallet, shared with your husband and 3 children, creaks softly as you shift the rough woolen blanket spun from your own sheep's fleece the summer before, clinging to your skin with a chill that seeps from the wattle-and-daub walls. The room is small, no more than 12 feet across, its single door and narrow window slits offering scant defense against the creeping cold. Outside, the first frost glimmers on the rye stubble, a silver veil that crunches underfoot like brittle parchment when you finally rise, as a villain bound to the manor of Sir John. Your days have been a rhythm of plough and sickle since the thaw of spring. But now, with All Saints' Day fading into memory, the season turns its face toward the long night. You pull on your woolen kirtle, the fabric coarse against your calloused palms, its hem frayed from years of trudging through mud and dew. Over it goes the hooded mantle, lined with scraps of lambskin, a luxury permitted by the sumptuary laws of 1363, though the fur is thin and matted from use. Your feet find the leather-soled turn shoes, stiff with yesterday's damp, and you step toward the hearth at the room's center, where embers glow like distant stars in the gloom. The fire, fed with twigs gathered by the children in the waning warmth of October, spits softly, releasing a faint, acrid tang of green wood that mingles with the earthy musk of the cow and 2 pigs huddled in the far corner. In this one-room dwelling, man and beast share the space, their combined breath a meager ward against the frost that claws at the thatch overhead. You kneel by the hearth, your knees pressing into the packed turf floor, strewn with rushes that whisper against your skirts. With hands steady from seasons of toil, you coax the embers to life, adding slivers of dried beech collected from the Lord's wood the month prior. The flame catches slowly, a hesitant dance of orange and gold, warming your face while the rest of you shivers in the draft that sneaks through the unsealed cracks. This is the quiet ritual of preparation, the mundane anchor in the shifting tide of the year. Winter, in these English lowlands, is no sudden siege, but a gradual encroachment, born of the Little Ice Age's chill grip that has tightened since the warm centuries past. Chronicles from Florence speak of snows that linger a month in 1352. And here in Cuxham, the manorial records note frosts that blacken the late cabbages by March. You know the signs, the geese honking southward in ragged flocks, their calls echoing like mournful bells across the floodplain. The river's edge rimed with ice that snaps like thin glass under a boot, the wind carrying the sharp, metallic bite of impending freeze. Your husband, Thomas, rises next, his broad frame silhouetted against the low-beamed ceiling. He is a carter by trade, his hands scarred from harness leather and the reins of the Lord's oxen, and he grunts softly as he stretches the joints in his back, protesting the damp that settles in bones like yours. Together, you tend the fire, banking it with peat turves dug from the common mordants, black bricks that smolder long and low, their smoky peat scent a constant companion through the dark months. The children stir then, little Agnes with her tangled hair, and the boy twins, no more than 7 winters old, rubbing sleep from eyes rimmed with the faint red of yesterday's chill. There is no time for lingering. The morning's light, pale and fleeting, filters through the oiled parchment over the window slit, casting a watery glow on the trestle table where your meager stores wait. Breakfast is a simple affair, prepared over the rekindled flames. You crumble yesterday's rye loaf into a wooden bowl, the bread dense and gray from the coarse flour ground at the Lord's 1/10 of it tithed to the church, as Pope Celestine decreed the very air of the windmill belonged to God, into the crumbs. You stir a thin pottage of leeks harvested from the kitchen garden, their green tops wilted but still yielding a faint, oniony sharpness that cuts the blandness. A handful of dried peas, swollen in last night's soak, bubbles in an iron pot suspended from the chimney crane, their starch releasing a subtle, earthy steam that fogs the air. Thomas spoons in a rasher of salted bacon from the autumn cure, the fat rendered crisp over the coals, its sizzle a rare music in the quiet. Milk from the cow, warmed to ward off the morning's bite, is poured sparingly enough for the children, whose growing frames demand it, though you and Thomas make do with ale. Small beer brewed from the barley harvest, and soured just enough to last the winter without spoiling as you eat. Seated on stools carved from oak stumps, the conversation turns to the tasks ahead. The first frosts signal the close of open field work. The 3-field system leaves 1 plot fallow this year, its soil turned under for the spring wheat. But the winter crop of barley sown in September now hunkers beneath a mulch of manure spread in October's mud. Today, with the ground still yielding before the true freeze, you must check the hedgerows for stray windfalls bruised but salvageable, their tart flesh perfect for drying into leathers that will sweeten the Yuletide pottage. Thomas will yoke the ox to the sled for hauling firewood from the copse, the frozen ruts easing the drag where summer's mire would bog the wheels. The children, bundled in smocks of undyed wool, will scatter to gather kindling, their small fingers numb but nimble in the search for fallen branches. The snap of twigs underfoot, a rhythmic counterpoint to the distant lowing of village cattle. This preparation is the peasant's quiet defiance, woven from the threads of survival passed down through generations. In the manorial court rolls of Cuxham entries from winters past recount the fines for poaching hares in desperation, or the immersements for failing to repair the common dike against flood, but also the quiet mercies, like the Lord's occasional grant of extra gleanings to the widow next door. Your neighbor, old widow Marjorie, lost her son to the ague last spring, and her store is thinner than yours. Come the solstice, you will share a loaf, the crust broken, with the same hands that now knead dough for tomorrow. Community is the invisible weave that holds the village together. From the shared labor of the boon work for the Lord to the murmured prayers in the timbered nave of the parish church, where Father Elias intones the litany against famine each Advent Sunday. Yet, as the sun climbs its low arc, barely cresting the hedgerows before dipping toward dusk, you step out into the yard, the frost yielding to your steps with a faint, crystalline sigh. The air tastes of iron and decay, the last leaves of the oak rattling like dry bones in the breeze. You survey the barn, its door ajar, where sacks of threshed grey notes, mostly, with a precious measure of wheatlean against the walls, guarded by the tabby cat who curls in their shadow. The pig, fattened on acorns, through the fall, roots in the sty, oblivious to the blade that awaits it come December. These are the bulwarks against the starvation winters that whisper in the chronicles. The Great Famine of 1315 to 1317, when rains turned fields to quagmires and bellies to hollows, claiming a tenth of England's folk. You have heard the tales from traveling friars how, in those years, families ate the bark from trees, their mouths raw with tannin, or turned to the grim charnel of the churchyard for sustenance in the depths of despair. For now, though the first frosts are a gentle herald, lulling you into the rhythm of endurance, you latch the barn door, the wood rough under your fingers, and turn back to the cottage, where the hearth's glow beckons like a promise. The day unfolds in its steady cadence, the rhythmic chop of Thomas's axe in the copse, the children's laughter muffled by scarves as they pile armfuls of kindling, the slow simmer of the pottage that will stretch through supper. Evening comes early, the sky bruising to indigo by the ringing of the curfew bell from the church tower. You sup by firelight, the flames casting long shadows that dance across the smoke-blackened beams, the taste of leek and pea lingering on your tongue like a faint comfort. The children nestle close, their breaths sinking with the wind's low moan outside, while Thomas mends a harness strap, the all-piercing leather with a soft, methodical pop dot as the fire dies to embers once more. You bank it high with the last of the day's wood, the heat seeping into your bones like a whispered assurance. The cottage settles into silence, broken only by the pig's contented grunts and the distant hoot of an owl threading through the thatch. You lie back on the pallet, the blanket drawn tight, the chill pressing at the edges of sleep. Winter has only begun its approach, the stores full enough for now, the routines a familiar embrace. But as the nights lengthen and the frosts deepen into true ice, what subtle hungers will begin to stir in the quiet hours before dawn? Gathering the last harvest, echoes of abundance you rise again in the gray half-light of dawn, the air in your Cuxham cottage sharper now, as if the frost has crept closer overnight. The year is still 1347, and the village hums with the quiet urgency of late autumn. The fields beyond your door, a patchwork of stubble and mud where the last of the harvest waits. You pull the woolen kirtle over your shoulders, its weave heavy with the scent of lanolin and smoke, and lace your turn shoes, their soles slick from yesterday's dew. The hearth's embers glow faintly, tended through the night to keep the chill at bay, and you stir them with a hazel stick, the faint crackle blending with the soft snores of your children curled on the straw pallet. Outside, the world is hushed, the frost thicker now, coating the thatch in a delicate crust that glints like scattered salt under the weak November sun. Today is for gleaning, the final sweep of the fields before winter seals them under snow. You step into the yard, your breath clouding in the crisp air, and join Thomas, who shoulders a woven basket of willow withes, its edges frayed from seasons of use. The children trail behind, Agnes clutching a small sack, the twins chattering about the hares they hope to spot darting among the hedgerows. The path to the open fields winds past the church, its stone tower squat against the sky. And you nod to widow Marjorie, already bent over her own plot. Her fingers slow but steady as she plucks stray grains from the dirt. The manor's records, etched in Latin on vellum, note the gleaning rights granted to villains like use scraps of barley and wheat left after the lords. Reapers have taken their share, a small mercy taxed by the reeve's watchful eye. The fields stretch wide, divided into strips by ancient furrows, each family's plot marked by stones, smoothed by generations of hands. The three-field system, rooted in custom since the Doomsday Book, has left one field fallow this year, its earth turned to rest under a blanket of dung. But the winter barley and rye fields, sown in September, now stand in stubbled ruin. You kneel in your strip, the soil cold and clumpy beneath your knees, and begin the slow work of gathering. Your fingers, roughened by years of spinning and hoeing, sift through the dirt, seeking the small, hard pearls of grain missed by the sickle. Each kernel barley's nutty bite, rye's dense promise feels like a victory against the lean months ahead. The air smells of wet earth and decaying straw, a rich, loamy tang that clings to your palms, mingling with the faint sweetness of rotting apples fallen from the orchard nearby. Gleaning is a task of patience, its rhythm soothing in its repetition. You move methodically, row by row, the crunch of frost underfoot a quiet metronome. Thomas works beside you, his breath steady, pausing now and then to rub warmth into his hands, his knuckles red from the cold. The children scamper along the edges, their sacks half filled with gleanings, and the occasional treasure a bent nail, a shard of broken pottage find, met with a giggle or a whispered tale. Agnes, her cheeks flushed, points to a cluster of wild parsnips, their feathery tops still green despite the frost, and you nod approval. Their woody roots will thicken tonight's pottage. Their faint anise sent a welcome note in the pot. The twins, bolder now, dart toward the hedgerow, where blackthorn bushes hide sloes, their bitter purple berries destined for drying or a rare brew, if sugar can be spared. This gathering is more than survival. It is a ritual of memory, tying you to the seasons past. The manorial court rolls of Cuxham, kept in the Lord's Hall, recount harvests lean and bountiful, the year 1340, when rains drowned the wheat and the village tithed extra to buy oats from Oxford, or 1345, when the barley yielded so well that even the poorest cotters ate white bread at Christmas. You recall your mother's tales of the great famine 30 years prior, when the fields turned to mire and the village lost a third of its folk to hunger's slow grip. Her voice, low and steady by the hearth, spoke of gleaning as salvation, how a single day's haul could stretch a family's stores a week longer, how the children's small hands could find what grown eyes missed. Now, you teach your own children the same, guiding Agnes to spot the glint of rye among the clods, showing the twins how to twist parsnip roots free without breaking their fragile crowns. The sun climbs higher, its light thin but enough to warm your back as you work. Across the field, other families labor in their strips, their voices carrying softly John the miller cursing a stone that blunts his knife, Alice the brewer singing a hymn to keep time. Community binds you here in the shared toil of the open fields, where no fence divides one strip from another. The Lord's domain, worked by your boon labor in summer, lies harvested now. its sheaves stacked in the great barn. But these gleanings are yours, a right won through centuries of custom. The reeve, a stern man named Robert, with a limp from a cart accident, passes by, his tally stick notched to count your haul. He nods, satisfied, and moves on, his cloak flapping like a crow's wing in the breeze. By midday, your basket holds a modest pile, a peck of barley, half as much rye, a handful of oats missed by the threshers. The children's sacks bulge with parsnips and a few crab apples, their skins puckered but salvageable for cider or drying. You pause to eat, sitting on a boundary stone, sharing a hunk of rye bread and a wedge of hard cheese traded from the dairymaid last week. The cheese, sharp and crumbly, cuts the bread's heavy grain, and you sip from a leather flask of small beer, its sour edge familiar as the earth beneath you. Thomas points to the sky, where clouds gather like wool on a distaff, promising rain by dusk. The thought quickens your pace. Wet grain rots, and every kernel must be dry before storage. As the afternoon wanes, you turn to the orchard, where the Lord's apple trees drop their final fruits. Custom allows you to gather windfalls, and you find a dozen, bruised but firm, their skins mottled red and gold. The twins chase a hedgehog that scampers from the underbrush, its spines catching the fading light, and you call them back, mindful of the reeve's fines for wandering too far. The orchard's air is sweeter, heavy with fermenting fruit and the faint musk of leaf mold. You tuck the apples into your apron, their weight a small comfort, and cast an eye to the blackthorn bushes, where sloes gleam like dark jewels. A few handfuls join your haul, their tart promise a hedge against the bland weeks ahead. The day ends with the bell for vespers, its toll faint across the fields. You trudge home, baskets heavy, the children trailing with their sacks. The cottage welcomes you with the hearth's faint warmth, and you spread the gleanings on a clean cloth by the fire to dry. The grain's soft clatter, a lullaby of provision. Supper is pottage, again, thickened with today's parsnips, the steam rising in lazy curls as you stir. Thomas carves a new peg for the barn door, the wood's grainy scent mingling with the broths. The children, weary now, listen as you recount a tale of a long-ago harvest, when a single barley stalk bore 100 grains, a sign of God's favor. Their eyes droop, lulled by your voice, and the fires crackle as night falls. The cottage grows still, the wind outside carrying the first spit of rain against the thatch. You store the dried grains in a clay pot sealed with a wooden lid and check the apples, their skins cool to the touch. The harvest, small as it is, feels like a bulwark against the winter's hunger. But as you lie down, the blanket heavy with damp, you wonder, when the snows bury the paths and the stores dwindle, what will these gleanings truly yield? The frost of early December 1347, settling like a guest who lingers too long, musky breath mingling with the scent of peat smoke that curls from the hearth. The thatch above creaks under a fresh rime of ice, and the oiled parchment over the window slits glows faintly with the dawn's pale light. You rise, pulling the woolen kirtle tight around you, its fibers stiff with cold, and slip into your turn shoes, the leather cracked but still holding against the damp earth floor. The fire, banked low through the night, needs tending, and you kneel to feed it kindling from the children's gleanings. The dry twigs, snapping with a soft pop, that stirs Agnes and the twins from their straw pallet. A task both grim and vital, for the pigs fattened on autumn's acorns are the heart of your winter stores. You step outside, the yard slick with frost that crunches underfoot, and fetch the iron knife, its blade honed on the whetstone Thomas keeps by the barn. The village is stirring, too, the air carrying the faint grunt of other pigs and the low voices of neighbors preparing their own. The manor's court rolls, kept by the clerk in the Lord's hall, note this season's rhythm. After Martinmas, when rents were paid in grain, comes the slaughter, a custom as old as the doomsday book's tally of swine. Your 2 pigs, a sow and a yearling boar, have rooted contentedly in their sty since summer, their flanks thickened on mast and kitchen scraps. Now their sacrifice will feed you through the snows. Thomas joins you, his breath clouding as he drags a wooden trough into the yard. The children, bundled in their smocks, watch wide-eyed from the doorway, knowing better than to interfere, but drawn by the ritual's weight. You fill the trough with water warmed over the hearth, its steam rising like a specter in the chill. The sow, heavy and docile, is led from the sty, her hooves slipping slightly on the frozen ground. Thomas murmurs to her a low hum of reassurance as he ties her to a post with hemp rope. You steady the knife, its weight familiar from last year's task, and with a swift, practiced cut, you open her throat. The blood flows dark and warm into a clay bowl, stirred quickly with a stick to keep it from clotting later. It will thicken a pudding with oats and herbs, a rare richness for the Yuletide table. The boar follows, his struggle brief but fierce, and Thomas holds him firm as you work. The air fills with the iron tang of blood and the pig's final squeals, a sound that carries across the village, blending with the distant cries of other slaughters. The children, used to this by their 7th winter, fetch buckets to catch the offal, their small hands steady despite the cold. You work quickly, the frost urging haste, scraping the hides with a flint blade to remove coarse bristles, the hair piling like dirty snow at your feet. The hides, once cleaned, will be tanned with oak bark from the Lord's wood, perhaps traded for a new pair of shoes come spring. For now, you focus on the butchery, your knife parting flesh from bone with the precision of necessity. The carcasses are hung from the barn's rafters, their weight swaying slightly as you and Thomas quarter them. The liver, kidneys, and heart are set aside for tonight's supper, their rich, slippery warmth a contrast to the icy air. The rest haunches, shoulders, and belly must be preserved, a task that fills the day with smoke and labor. You build a fire in the yard, using green wood to produce a thick, choking haze, and hang the meat in the cottage's chimney nook, where the smoke will curl around it for days, imparting a woody, bitter temps that wards off rot. The fat is rendered in an iron pot, its sizzle a steady rhythm, the rendered lard poured into clay jars to cool into a pale, waxy seal. This lard will fry onions, thicken pottages, and grease the griddle for flatbreads when flour runs low. The village shares in this work, as it does all things. Widow Marjorie, too frail to slaughter her own pig, sends her grandson to help, and you give him a strip of bacon for her pot. John, the miller, his hands dusted with rye flour, offers a sack of coarse meal in trade for a knuckle joint, his laughter carrying over the crackle of your fire. The manor's reeve, Robert, passes by, his tally stick, noting the pigs Kilditch households slaughter, taxed with a cut for the Lord, a shoulder or a ham delivered to the great hall by dusk. The air grows heavy with smoke, its acrid bite mingling with the scent of blood and damp earth, a reminder of the seasons turning. By afternoon, your hands are slick with fat, your kirtle stained, but the barn holds a winter's worth of meat, sausages stuffed with minced, offal, and dried sage from the garden. Casting long shadows across the frost-hardened yard, you pause to eat. The liver, seared over the fire with a handful of leeks, is soft and iron-rich, its warmth spreading through you as you share it with Thomas and the children. The twins, their faces smudged with soot, chatter about the pig's bristles, imagining them woven into a brush for Annis's hair. You smile, the fire's glow softening the ache in your shoulders, and sip small beer from a wooden cup, its sourness cutting the meat's richness. The meal is a brief respite, a moment to savor the abundance before the leaner days, when each slice of bacon will be rationed like a prayer. The evening brings the task of cleaning, the blood-soaked earth raked smooth, the trough scrubbed with ash and water. You check the smoking meat, adjusting the fire to keep the haze steady, its tendrils curling like ghosts through the cottage. The children, weary now, curl by the hearth, their breathing soft as you tell them of winters past, how your grandfather, a villain like you, once smoked a boar so well it lasted till Easter, its flavor a legend in the village. The tale, half remembered, lulls them toward sleep, their eyelids heavy as the thatch above groans under a fresh gust of wind. Night falls, the stars hidden by clouds that promise snow. You and Thomas sit by the fire, mending a tear in a sack with a bone needle, the thread spun from last spring's flax. The cottage smells of smoke and blood, of life preserved against the cold. The pig's gift is secure for now, the hams and bacons, a bulwark against hunger. But as you bank the fire and settle onto the pallet, the blanket heavy with the day's damp, a question lingers. The smoke will keep the meat, but when the stores begin to thin and the winter's hunger bites, what other sacrifices will the season demand? Mending the hearth, fires against the dark you wake to the sharp chill of a mid-December morning in 1347. The air in your Cuxham cottage, heavy with the scent of lingering smoke and the faint musk of the animals huddled in their corner. The frost has tightened its grip, seeping through the wattle-and-daub walls, and the thatch overhead groans softly under a fresh layer of rime. You rise from the straw pallet, your breath visible in the dim light filtering through the oiled parchment over the window slits. The woolen kirtle you pull on is stiff with cold, its fibers catching the faint warmth of your body as you lace your mojas, their soles worn thin from weeks of trudging through frost and mud. The hearth at the center of the cottage, the heart of your winter survival, glows faintly with last night's embers, its warmth a fragile shield against the creeping dark. Today's task is to mend the hearth and the cottage itself, fortifying your small sanctuary against the deepening winter. You kneel by the fire, the packed earth floor cold against your knees, and stir the embers with a hazel stick, coaxing them to life. The flames flicker, casting a soft glow across the room, where Thomas and the children still sleep, their breaths a quiet rhythm beneath the woolen blanket. The fire's crackle is a comfort, but you know its hunger is relentless. Each day demands more fuel, more labor to keep the cold at bay. The manorial records of Cuxham, scratched on vellum in the Lord's Hall, note the fines for stealing wood from the common, a reminder of the delicate balance between warmth and law. Your family's woodpile, stacked with beech and ash from the Lord's copse, must last until spring. And every log is a calculation. You step outside, the yard a patchwork of frost that crunches like brittle glass underfoot. The air smells of ice and decay, the last leaves of the oak tree by the barn stripped bare, their skeletal branches clawing at a sky heavy with the threat of snow. Thomas joins you, his hands tucked into his sleeves, and together you inspect the cottage's walls, their daub cracked from weeks of freeze and thaw. The wattle-woven willow branches that form the frame peaks through in places, letting drafts whistle into the room where your children sleep. You fetch a bucket of clay from the riverbank, dug before the water froze. Its texture gritty and cold as you mix it with straw and dung in a trough by the barn. The mixture, thick and pungent, smells of earth and animal, a reminder of the land's unyielding demands. Mending the walls is slow work, your hands numbing as you press the daub into cracks, smoothing it with a wooden trowel. Thomas works beside you, his breath clouding as he weaves new willow withes into the gaps, their green flexibility a contrast to the brittle frost. The children, roused by the cold, join you, their small hands patting the daub smooth, their laughter muffled by scarves as they chase each other's shadows across the yard. Agnes, her cheeks red, points out a weak spot near the door, where the wind sneaks through like a thief, and you nod, grateful for her sharp eyes. The twins, ever restless, gather more straw from the barn, their arms full of golden stalks that catch the weak sunlight like a fleeting promise of warmth. Inside, the hearth itself needs care. The stones that line it, blackened from years of smoke, have loosened, their mortar crumbling under the fire's heat. You scrape away the old ash, its powdery scent sharp in your nose, and mix a new batch of mortar with clay and sand, the texture gritty under your fingers. Thomas resets the stones, his hands steady from years of carting, while you pack the mortar tight, sealing the gaps to keep the fire's heat from escaping up the chimney. The chimney nook, where the hams from last week's slaughter still hang, curls with smoke, its woody tang blending with the clay's earthiness. The fire must burn steady, not fierce, to preserve both meat and warmth, and you adjust the peat turves, their dense, black weight smoldering with a slow, reliable glow. The village shares this labor, as it does all things. Widow Marjorie, her hands too frail for heavy mending, sends her grandson with a bundle of rushes to trade for a share of your lard, and you accept knowing her hearth burns low. John the miller, his apron dusted with flour, stops by to offer a sack of bran for kindling, his voice gruff but kind as he inspects your work. The reeve, Robert, passes with his tally stick, noting the repairs and Mended cottage's risk fines. For a week, home burdens the village, when snows collapse roofs or fires spark from neglected hearths. The air carries the sounds of other families at work, the thud of hammers, the scrape of trowels, the low murmur of prayers for strength against the cold. The walls are patched, the hearth secure, and you pause to eat, sitting on a bench by the fire. The meal is simple, a pottage of dried peas and parsnips from the gleaning, thickened with a spoonful of lard, its warmth spreading through you like a quiet blessing. The children share a crust of rye bread, its dense chew softened by a smear of cheese traded from the dairymaid. You sip small beer, its sour edge familiar, and watch the fire, its flames a steady pulse against the gray light filtering through the window slits. Thomas carves a new peg for the door, the wood's grainy scent mingling with the pottage's steam. And you mend a tear in Annis's smock, the bone needle gliding through the wool with a soft, rhythmic tug. As the afternoon fades, you check the woodpile, its logs dwindling faster than you'd like. The children gather kindling from the hedgerow, their arms full of twigs that snap underfoot, their laughter a faint shursing system, bright note in the village air. The day's work continues, the repetitive tasks of mending and tending the fire lulling you into a quiet rhythm. You stack the wood carefully, each piece a precious guard against the cold, while Thomas repairs a cracked shutter, his hammer's steady beat echoing in the stillness. The evening brings a heavier chill, the sky bruising to a deep indigo as the first snowflakes drift down, soft as whispers against the thatch. You bank the hearth high, the peat's slow burn casting a warm glow across the cottage. Supper is a thin broth of bacon bones and leeks, the children slurping quietly, their eyes heavy with the day's labor. You tell them a story of a long ago winter, when the village built a great fire in the churchyard to warm the frozen, the tale weaving a gentle spell as their heads nod. Thomas mends a rope by the firelight, his fingers deft despite the cold, while you spin a handful of wool. The spindle's soft whir, a soothing counterpoint to the wind's low moan outside. As you settle onto the pallet, the blanket heavy with the scent of smoke and straw, the cottage feels secure, its walls and hearth. The fire's glow lingers, a faint promise of warmth. But as the snow thickens outside, a quiet question stirs in the silence. How long will these careful repairs hold against the winter's gathering weight? Dawn's sparse table, broths and breads of rye awaken in the dim chill of your Cuxham cottage, the air thick with the scent of peat smoke and the faint, lingering temps of smoked ham from the chimney nook. It is late December 1347, and the winter's grip has tightened, the frost etching delicate patterns on the oiled parchment covering the window slits. The thatch above creaks under a fresh fall of snow, its weight muffling the world outside. You rise from the straw pallet, the woolen blanket stiff with cold, and pull on your kirtle. Its coarse weave catching the faint warmth of your body. Your turn shoes, patched with scraps from last week's mending, slide onto your feet, the leather damp from yesterday's trudge through the yard. The hearth glows faintly, its embers carefully banked through the night, and you kneel to coax them to life with a handful of kindling, the dry twigs snapping softly as they catch. Today, your task is to prepare the day's meals, a careful dance of stretching meager stores to feed your family through the long, dark weeks. The fire flares, casting a warm glow across the packed earth floor, where rushes crunch underfoot, their grassy scent mingling with the smoke. Thomas stirs on the pallet, his breath clouding as he rises, while Agnes and the twins remain curled beneath the blanket, their soft snores a quiet rhythm in the stillness. You check the clay pot by the hearth, where a handful of dried peas soaks in water drawn from the well before it froze. The village of Cuxham, bound to the manor's rhythms, depends on such foresight. As the court rolls note the tithes of grain and the fines for hoarding food beyond the Lord's share. Your stores barley, rye, and a small sack of oats from the autumn gleaning dwindle daily. Each meal a calculation against the hunger that looms with January's snows. You begin with the morning's pottage, the cornerstone of your winter table. Into the iron pot, suspended from the chimney crane, you pour the soaked peas, their faint earthy scent rising as they simmer. You add a leek, its green top wilted but still sharp, harvested from the garden before the first hard freeze. A pinch of dried thyme, gathered in summer and hung in the rafters, adds a subtle warmth, its fragrance a faint echo of sunnier days. The pottage bubbles slowly, its steam curling like a ghost in the cold air, and you stir it with a wooden spoon, the handle worn smooth by years of use. Thomas, now at your side, slices a rasher of bacon from the smoked ham, its woody tang cutting through the pottage's blandness as it sizzles in a skillet over the fire. The fat renders into golden beads, and you save every drop, scraping it into a clay jar for tomorrow's cooking. The children wake, drawn by the fire's warmth and the pottage's aroma. Agnes, her hair tangled from sleep, helps you knead dough for the day's bread. A dense loaf of rye mixed with a handful of barley flour to stretch the stores. The rye, ground at the Lord's mill and tithed to the church, is coarse, flecked with grit that catches in your teeth. But it bakes into a heavy, chewy loaf that fills bellies through the cold. You shape the dough on the trestle table, its surface scarred from years of meals, and set it to rise near the hearth, where the fire's heat teases out a faint, nutty scent. The twins, their cheeks flushed, fetch a jug of small beer from the corner. Its sour temp's a staple, now that fresh water risks freezing in the well. Milk from the cow, kept warm in the stall, is reserved for the children, its creamy richness a small luxury against the day's chill. Breakfast is served on wooden trenchers, the pottage ladled steaming into bowls, the bacon crumbled sparingly to flavor each portion. The rye bread, baked yesterday, is broken into chunks, its crust hard but softened by dipping into the broth. You eat slowly, seated on stools around the table. The fire's crackle a steady companion. The children chatter softly, Agnes recounting a dream of spring flowers, the twins arguing over who found the most kindling yesterday. Thomas, his hands scarred from the cart's reins, sips his beer and speaks of the day's works, checking the barn's stores, mending a broken yoke before the snow deepens. The meal is simple but warm, a bulwark against the cold that presses against the cottage's newly mended walls outside. The village wakes to the same sparse rhythm. The air carries the faint clatter of pots and the low voices of neighbors tending their own hearths. Widow Marjorie, her stores thinner than yours, sends her grandson with a small basket of dried apples, traded for a scoop of your pottage, a kindness that binds the village through the lean months. The manorial records, kept in the Lord's hall, note the communal duties of winter, the sharing of food when stores run low, the fines for wasting grain or neglecting the common well. John the miller, his apron dusted with flour, passes by with a sack of bran, offering it for kindling in exchange for a sliver of bacon. His gruff laugh, a familiar note in the frosty air. By midday, you prepare a second meal, a thinner pottage of oats and parsnip roots from the gleaning, boiled with a bone from the pig's slaughter for flavor. The bone, stripped of meat, yields a faint richness, its marrow softening the broth's edge. You bake the rye loaf, its crust cracking in the clay oven built into the hearth, the heat warming your hands as you pull it free. The bread's weight is a comfort, its dense crumb a promise of sustenance. You slice it thin, saving half for tomorrow, and serve it with a smear of lard, its slick texture a quiet luxury. The children eat eagerly, their fingers sticky, while Thomas repairs a spoon, carving a new handle from a scrap of oak. The wood's grainy scent blending with the broth's steam dot as the afternoon wanes. You check the stores in the barn, the sacks of grain lighter now, their contents measured in careful handfuls. The apples, dried into leathery rings, hang in a net by the rafters, their faint sweetness a hope for the Yuletide feast. The cow, lowing softly in her stall, gives less milk now, her feed sparse with only hay and bran to sustain her. You ration the oats, knowing the months ahead will test your foresight. The fire, fed with peat and kindling, burns low but steady, its warmth a constant labor. You spin wool by its light, the spindle's soft whir, lulling the children as they play with a straw doll, its shape worn from their small hands. Evening falls early, the sky a deep gray as snow dusts the thatch. Supper is a repeat of midday's pottage, stretched with a handful of dried peas, the broth thinner now but warm. You tell the children a tale of a winter long ago, when a kind lord shared his grain with a starving village, the story softening the edges of their hunger. Thomas mends a strap by the fire, his fingers steady, while the wind howls outside, rattling the shutters. The cottage holds fast, its hearth a glowing heart, but as you settle onto the pallet, the blanket heavy with smoke and damp, a question lingers in the quiet as the days grow shorter and the stores thinner. What will the sparse table offer when the snow buries all hope of relief? Tending the beasts, warmth in the shared stall you stir, in the deepening chill of your Cuxham cottage. The air thick with the mingled scents of peat smoke, damp wool, and the warm, hay-laced musk of the animals in their corner stall. It is early January 1348, and the winter has settled heavy now. The snow piled against the wattle-and-daub walls like a silent sentinel. The thatch overhead sags under its weight, muffling the faint howl of wind that rattles the shutters. You rise from the straw pallet, the blanket heavy and cold where it meets the air, and pull on your kirtle, its fibers rough against skin chilled from the night's repose. Your turn shoes, laced tight, sink slightly into the packed turf floor, strewn with fresh rushes. Their faint, grassy whisper, a small comfort. The hearth's embers glow dimly, banked low to conserve the dwindling woodpile. And you add a peat turf, its dense smoke curling lazily as the flame awakens. Today calls for tending the beasts, the quiet labor that sustains both your family's warmth and the promise of spring's renewal. The cow, Bess, and the remaining pig spared from the autumn slaughter for breeding huddle in the partitioned corner of the cottage, their bodies a living furnace against the frost. In these close quarters, shared with man and child, their heat radiates softly, a primal bulwark etched into the manorial customs of Cuxham since the Norman tally of Doomsday. The court rolls, inscribed in the Lord's Hall, recount the fines for neglecting livestock lost milk for the tide. Barren fields without draft oxen, you know the rhythm well, passed from your mother's hands to yours. Without these creatures, the winter's sparse table would crumble to dust. You light a rush dip, its tallow flame flickering yellow in the gloom, and approach the stall, the wooden barrier rough under your palm. Bess lowing softly, her breath steaming in the cold, her brown eyes calm as you stroke her flank, the coarse hair warm and dusted with hay. She yields a pail of milk, thinner now than in autumn's flush, drawn with steady pulls that echo the cottage's quiet. The milk, warm and frothy, steams in the clay bucket, its creamy scent cutting the stall's earthy temps. You save the last for the children, knowing their growing bones demand it, while Thomas and you make do with small beer, its sour bite a familiar trade-off. The pig, rooting in the straw, grunts contentedly, his bulk a promise of next year's slaughter. Fed on scraps from the pottage pot and the last of the acorns gleaned before the snows, Thomas rises then, his frame silhouetted against the hearth's glow, and joins you in the stall. His hands scarred but gentle as he forks fresh hay from the barn's loft, the hay baled in summer's dry heat and stacked against the wall. Smells of sun-faded grass, a faint meadow echo in the winter's grip. You muck the stall together, the pitchfork's tines scraping the dung into a heap by the door later. It will manure the fallow field, its rich rot turning soil for the spring wheat. The work is rhythmic, the scrape and toss a steady cadence that warms your muscles against the chill. The children stir, Agnes rubbing sleep from her eyes to help scatter bran from the miller's trade, the golden flakes crunching underfoot as the cow munches. The twins, bolder in the stall's warmth, chase a stray chicken that pecks at the edges, their giggles muffled by the lowing and the wind's distant moan. Outside, the yard is a white expanse, the snow knee-deep and crisp, its surface unbroken save for the path shoveled to the barn. You venture there with Thomas, the cold air biting like needles through your mantle, the wool lined with the thinnest scrap of lambskin. The barn, its timbers creaking, holds the ox yoked for the Lord's cart, his breath fogging the air as you check his tether. He stamps a hoof, the sound muffled in the hay, and you groom him with a curry comb, the bristles rasping softly against his hide, loosening flakes of dried mud from autumn's labors. The ox's strength is the manor's lifeblood, noted in the rolls as boon work due thrice weekly, even in snow-hauling peat or mending dikes. You feed him a measure of oats, rationed from the stores, their nutty scent rising as he chews, the kernels glinting in the dip's light. The village stirs in shared necessity, the air carrying faint calls and the crunch of boots on snow. Widow Marjorie, her cow long sold for grain, relies on the communal herd in the common meadow, but you spare her a cup of milk carried in a lidded jug against the freeze. John the miller, his own beasts lean from the cold, trades a handful of mash for a share of dung, his voice gruff through the barn door as he nods approval at your care. The reeve, Robert, limps by on his rounds, his tally stick notched for the livestock Sensessa, accustomed to guard against rustlers or plague, as the chronicles whisper of winters when fever took whole herds. The bonds of the village hold here too, in the quiet exchanges, a neighbor's rope for tethering, a whispered remedy of boiled nettles against the cow's winter cough by midday. The beasts are tended, their stalls clean and fed, the milk strained through muslin into a stone crock by the hearth. You pause to eat, the family gathered close. A bowl of yesterday's pottage, warmed with fresh milk, its creaminess, a rare softness against the rye bread's chew. The children sip their portions slowly, the warmth spreading pink to their cheeks, while Thomas recounts a tale from his youth of Aox that pulled a cart through waist-deep drifts to save a neighbor's harvest. The fire crackles, fed with a log from the guarded pile, its flames dancing shadows across the stall where Bess chews cooed, her rhythmic grind a lullaby that the afternoon brings finer tasks. You milk the cow again, the pail filling slower now, each drop a careful gift. The pig is checked for worms, a paste of garlic and honey smeared on his snout, an old healer's trick from the village wise woman, her herbs traded for bacon last fall. The children help spread straw, their small hands fluffing it thick for bedding, the golden strands catching the weak light from the door. Thomas repairs a broken halter, the leathers creak, blending with the beast's soft breaths, while you spin wool by the stall's warmth. The spindles were a thread in the cottage's quiet weave as dusk falls early, the sky a slate gray, pierced by the first stars. You sup with the milk stirred into a thin porridge of oats, the steam rising like a veil. The children nestle close to the stall, drawing comfort from the cow's heat, their eyes heavy as you murmur prayers for the beast's health. St. Bridget's litany against blight, intoned in the church each epiphany. Thomas banks the fire, the peat's glow lingering, and the cottage settles, the animals' breaths a steady tide in the night. You lie on the pallet, the blanket shared with the family's warmth, and the stall's distant hum. The snows hush outside a blanket of its own. The beasts are secure, their care a thread of life through the freeze. But as the winds rise and the cold probes deeper, what frailty in their forms might yet unravel the fragile chain of endurance? Midwinter repairs, weaving walls from willow yew, awaken to the brittle silence of a January morning in 1348. The air in your Cuxham cottage, sharp with the scent of frost and the faint, smoky tang of the hearth's peat fire. The snow outside has deepened, blanketing the village in a quiet that muffles even the distant lowing of the manor's cattle. The thatch above your head creaks under its frozen weight, and the wattle-and-daub walls, patched just weeks ago, bear new cracks where the cold has clawed through. You rise from the straw pallet, the woolen blanket stiff and heavy with damp, and pull on your kirtle. Its course we've chilled against your skin. Your turn shoes worn thin slide onto your feet, the leather creaking as you step toward the hearth. The embers glow faintly, a fragile pulse of warmth, and you add a handful of kindling, the dry twigs snapping as they catch, their faint piney scent mingling with the peat's earthiness. Today's task is to mend the cottage further, weaving new strength into its walls and roof to hold back the winter's relentless press. The fire flares, casting a soft glow across the packed earth floor, where the rushes, now thinning, whisper underfoot. Thomas stirs, his breath clouding as he rises, while Agnes and the twins remain curled beneath the blanket, their small forms huddled against the cold. The cow and pig in their stall grunt softly, their warmth a quiet gift in the shared space. The manorial court rolls, kept in the Lord's hall, note the penalties for neglected homes, fines of a penny or a day's labor for roofs that leak or walls that crumble, burdening the village when snows bring collapse. Your cottage, small but vital, must stand firm, its repairs a thread in the tapestry of survival. You begin inside, inspecting the wattle walls where the daub has flaked, exposing the woven willow beneath. The drafts sneak through like whispers, chilling the air near the pallet where the children sleep. You fetch a bundle of willow withes cut from the riverbank in late autumn and stored in the barn's dry corner, their green flexibility preserved against the freeze. Thomas, his hands scarred from the cart's reins, joins you, his knife slicing the withes into thin, pliable strips. The work is slow, your fingers numbing as you weave the willow into the wall's gaps. Each twist and tuck a deliberate act, the wood's faint, sappy scent rising as it bends. Agnes, awake now, helps hold the withes steady, her small hands careful despite the cold, while the twins gather more straw from the barn to mix with clay for daub outside. The yard is a frozen expanse, the snow crunching underfoot like dry bones. You and Thomas climb a wooden ladder to the roof, its thatch brittle and patched from last month's work. The snow has found weaknesses, seeping through to drip onto the floor below, and you pull away the damaged straw, its damp, moldy smell sharp in the icy air. Thomas cuts fresh thatch from the barn store, the reeds harvested from the river's edge in summer, their golden length still pliant enough to weave. You layer them tight, binding them with hemp twine, the rope's rough texture biting your palms as you knot it against the wind's tug. The children, bundled in their smocks, watch from below, their breath clouding as they pass up bundles of reed, their laughter a faint warmth in the gray light. The village hums with similar labor, the air carrying the thud of hammers and the soft scrape of knives on wood. Widow Marjorie, her cottage frail, sends her grandson to borrow your ladder, offering a handful of dried sloes in trade, their tart promise a small gift for your pottage. John the miller, his own roof sturdy, stops by with a sack of bran for kindling, his voice gruff as he admires your weaving, a skill honed since your girlhood. The reeve, Robert, limps through the snow, his tally stick notched to record repairs, his eyes sharp for any home that risks the village's safety. The manorial records of Cuxham recall winters when collapsed roofs buried families or sparked fires that leaped from hearth to thatch, and you work with care, knowing the stakes by midday. The walls are stronger, the willow woven tight, and you mix clay with straw and dung to daub the gaps, the mixture's pungent earthiness clinging to your hands. The task is repetitive, soothing in its rhythm, the slap of daub against wattle, a steady beat against the wind's low moan. You pause to eat, huddling by the hearth with a bowl of thin pottage oats and a single parsnip, flavored with a pinch of bacon fat from the slaughter. The children share a crust of rye bread, its dense chew softened by the broth, while Thomas sips small beer, its sour edge cutting the meal's blandness. The fire's warmth seeps into your bones, a brief respite. As you watch the flames dance shadows across the newly mended walls, the afternoon brings the roof's completion, the thatch layered thick to shed snow. You check the chimney, where the hams still smoke, their woody scent a promise of sustenance, and clear a crust of ice from the flue to keep the fire drawing clean. Thomas repairs a shutter, its hinges rusted from the damp, the hammer's clang echoing in the stillness. The twins, restless, gather kindling from the hedgerow, their arms full of twigs that snap in the cold, while Agnes sweeps the floor, the rushes piling like a fated harvest. The work binds you, each task a small defiance against the winter's weight. The cottage, a fragile fortress holding fast as dusk falls, the sky a deep violet streaked with clouds. You sup by the hearth, a broth of bacon bones and dried peas, the steam rising in lazy curls. The children, their cheeks flushed from the cold, listen as you tell a tale of a winter long ago, when a weaver's skill saved a village from collapse, her willow walls standing firm against a blizzard. Their eyes droop, lulled by the fire's crackle and the story's cadence, while Thomas carves a new peg for the barn door, the wood's grainy scent blending with the broth's warmth. You spin wool by the firelight, the spindle's soft whir a thread in the evening's quiet weave. The cottage settles, the walls and roof secure for now, the hearth's glow a steady pulse against the dark. You lie on the pallet, the blanket heavy with the scent of smoke and straw. The snows hush outside a blanket of its own. The repairs hold, a testament to your hands and the village's shared strength. But as the wind rises, rattling the new thatch, a question lingers in the silence. When the storms grow fiercer and the cold bites deeper, what unseen cracks might yet threaten the fragile shelter you've woven? Whispers by the flame, tales of winters past, the air in your Cuxham cottage, thick with the scent of peat smoke and the faint, lingering warmth of the animals in their stall. The snow outside has piled higher, its weight pressing against the newly mended walls, and the thatch overhead creaks softly, insulated by a fresh layer of frost. You rise from the straw pallet, the woolen blanket, stiff with cold, and pull on your kirtle, its coarse fibers chilled against your skin. Your turn shoes, patched and worn, slip onto your feet, the leather creaking as you step toward the hearth. The embers glow faintly, a delicate pulse of warmth, and you add a peat turf, its dense, earthy smoke curling upward as the fire stirs to life, casting a soft glow across the packed earth floor strewn with thinning rushes. Today, with the snow too deep for outdoor labor, you turn to the quiet work of the hearthside, mending small things and sharing stories to pass the long, dark hours. The fire is your anchor, its crackle a steady rhythm in the cottage's stillness, and you gather the family close to its warmth. Thomas, his hands scarred from the cart's reins, sits on a stool, sharpening a knife on a whetstone, the blade's soft rasp blending with the fire's pop. Agnes and the twins, roused by the light, huddle under a shared blanket, their cheeks flushed as they watch the flames. The cow and pig in their stall low softly, their breaths a warm undercurrent, while the manorial records of Cuxham kept in the Lord's Hall. Note these winter days as times of rest or endurance, when the village turns inward, bound by shared hearths and whispered tales. You begin by mending a torn smock, the bone needle gliding through the wool with a soft, rhythmic tug, its thread spun from last spring's fleece. The work is slow, soothing, the needle's path a meditation as you stitch by the firelight. Agnes, eager to learn, mimics your motions, her small hands clumsy but earnest as she patches a tear in her brother's tunic. The twins, restless, whittle sticks into crude shapes with a blunt knife, their chatter filling the air with tales of snow forts and imagined battles. You pause to stir the pottage pot, a thin broth of oats and dried peas simmering over the fire, its earthy steam mingling with the peat's smoky tang. A pinch of bacon fat, saved from the slaughter, adds a faint richness. A reminder of the pig's gift now hanging in the chimney nook. The fire draws you together, its glow a haven against the snow's weight outside. You tell a story, your voice low and measured, of a winter long ago, drawn from your mother's tales and the village's memory. It is the winter of 1315, during the Great Famine, when rains turned fields to mire and hunger stalked the land. You speak of a cotter named Edith, a widow who kept her children alive by boiling nettles and bark, her hearth never cold despite the empty granary. The children listen, their eyes wide, as you describe how Edith shared her last loaf with a starving traveler, earning the village's blessing when spring brought a bountiful harvest. The tale, half remembered, weaves a spell, its details grounded in the chronicles, whispered by traveling friars, how a tenth of England's folk perished, their bellies hollow, yet some, like Edith, endured through cunning and kindness. Thomas adds his own story, his voice a low rumble as he recounts his grandfather's winter. When a blizzard buried Cuxham for a fortnight, the old man, a carter like Thomas, led the village in digging paths to the church, where Father Elias kept a fire burning for all. The court rolls, Thomas says, noted the Lord's rare mercy that year, granting extra wood from the copse to keep the weak alive. The twins, their whittling paused, ask if the snow was as deep as now, and you point to the window slits, where frost glints like silver, the drifts outside reaching halfway up the wall. Agnes, her needle stilled, asks if Edith's nettle broth tasted bitter, and you smile, promising to show her the plant come spring, its sting softened by boiling the village. Though unseen through the snow, shares this rhythm of storytelling. Widow Marjorie, her cottage nearby Mess, sends her grandson with a small bundle of dried herbstime and sage for your pottage, traded for a spool of your spun wool. John the miller, snowbound like you, calls through the drifts, offering a tale of his own about a miller who ground frozen rye to save a village, his laughter carrying over the wind. The reeve, Robert, makes no rounds today, the snow too deep even for his limp, but the manorial customs hold in winter's heart. Stories are as vital as bread, binding the community when paths are lost. The chronicles of Oxford, kept by monks, speak of winters when tales kept despair at bay. Their words, a light in the dark by midday. The pottage is ready, ladled into wooden bowls, its warmth spreading through you as you eat. The rye bread, baked 2 days ago, is hard but softened by dipping into the broth, its dense chew a quiet comfort. The children sip small beer, its sour edge familiar, while you and Thomas share a cup of warmed milk from Bess, a rare treat to bolster you against the cold. The meal is sparse but shared, the fire's glow knitting you closer as you eat. Thomas resumes his sharpening, the whetstones scrape a steady counterpoint to the twins' chatter. While you mend a blanket, its patches a map of winters past. The afternoon drifts on, the fire fed sparingly with the last of the kindling, its flames dancing shadows across the walls. You teach Agnes a simple weave, her fingers learning the spindle's rhythm, while the twins carve a stick into a toy ox, their giggles muffled by the snow's hush. The stories continue, softer now, of winters when the Thames froze and villagers skated on its surface, or of a lost traveler guided home by a church bell's toll. each tale rooted in the village's memory, lulls the children, their eyes heavy as the fire's warmth seeps into their bones as dusk falls. The sky a deep indigo beyond the snow, you sup on the last of the pottage, its flavor stretched with a leek's sharp bite. The children, weary now, curl by the hearth, their breathing soft as you murmur a prayer for warmth. St. Agnes's litany against the cold, Thomas banks the fire, the peat's glow lingering. While you spin a final length of wool, the spindles were a thread in the night's quiet weave. The cottage holds fast, its walls and hearth secure. But as the snow whispers against the thatch, a question lingers in the tale's fading echoes. What forgotten lessons from winters past might yet guide you through the deepening dark, the deepening snow, paths lost in white silence? You awaken to the oppressive stillness of a late January morning in 1348. The air in your Cuxham cottage, heavy with the scent of peat smoke and the faint, musky warmth of the animals in their stall. The snow has fallen relentlessly through the night, its weight muffling the world outside, and the thatch overhead groans, burdened by drifts that pile against the wattle-and-daub walls. You rise from the straw pallet, the woolen blanket stiff with frost where it meets the chilled air, and pull on your kirtle, its coarse weave cold against your skin. Your turnshoes, patched and damp, creak as you step onto the packed earth floor, where the rushes, now sparse, crunch faintly underfoot. The hearth's embers glow dimly, a fragile pulse against the deepening winter, and you add a peat turf, its dense smoke curling upward as the fire flickers to life, casting a soft glow across the room. Today, the snow has trapped you indoors. The paths to the village and fields buried under a white silence that isolates each cottage. The fire is your lifeline, its crackle a steady rhythm in the quiet, and you focus on small tasks to preserve warmth and stores while the storm holds sway. Thomas stirs, his breath clouding as he rises, his hands rubbing warmth into his arms before checking the shutters, their wood swollen with damp. Agnes and the twins, huddled beneath the blanket, sleep on, their soft breaths mingling with the low grunts of the cow and pig in their stall. The manorial records of Cuxham, kept in the Lord's Hall, speak of winters like this, when blizzards severed the village from the world, and survival hinged on the stores and foresight of each household. The Chronicles of Oxford note the winter of 1342, when snows buried paths for weeks, and hunger crept closer as granaries emptied. You begin by checking the fire, its heat vital to keep the cottage livable. The woodpile, stacked in the barn, dwindles faster than you'd hoped, and you ration the logs, choosing a single beech branch to bolster the peat's slow burn. The flames flare, their woody scent mingling with the peat's earthiness, and you sweep the hearth, the ashes, powdery temps, sharp in your nose. The chimney nook, where the hams hang, curls with smoke, its bitter edge a reminder of the meat's slow preservation. You turn to the stores next, lifting the clay pot's lid to count the grains barley and rye, their kernels hard and sparse, a dwindling measure against the weeks ahead. The apples, dried into leathery rings, hang in a net by the rafters, their faint sweetness a promise for leaner days. Thomas, his hands steady, repairs a cracked wooden bowl, carving a patch from a scrap of oak, the wood's grainy scent. You mend a blanket, its wool patched with scraps from an old smock, the bone needle gliding through with a soft, rhythmic tug. Agnes, awake now, helps sort the kindling, her small hands stacking twigs by the hearth, while the twins, restless in the confined space, play with a straw doll, their giggles muffled by the snow's weight outside. The cottage feels smaller today, its walls a fragile barrier against the storm, and you move carefully, each task a quiet defiance against the cold that presses in. The village, though unseen through the drifts, endures in its own way. Widow Marjorie, her cottage, a stone's throw away, is snowbound like you, her grandson unable to trudge through the deep snow with his usual trades. You imagine her by her own hearth, stirring a thin pottage, her stories of past winters keeping her spirits afloat. John the miller, his mill silent under the snow, likely tends his own fire, his tales of grinding frozen rye a memory you shared by the flame. The reeve, Robert, cannot make his rounds, the paths lost, but the manorial customs hold. In such storms, each household is its own fortress, yet bound by the unspoken promise to aid when the snows relent. The chronicles whisper of winters when villages starved alone, but also of those saved by shared stores. When paths were cleared by midday, you prepare a sparse meal, a pottage of oats and a single leek, its sharp bite softened by a spoonful of lard from the slaughter. The broth simmers in the iron pot, its steam curling like a faint hope, and you ladle it into wooden bowls, the warmth spreading through your fingers as you serve. The rye bread, now 3 days old, is hard as stone, but you soak it in the broth, its dense chew yielding to the heat. The children eat slowly, their cheeks flushed by the fire, while Thomas sips small beer, its sour edge a familiar comfort. You share a cup of warmed milk from Bess, its creamy richness a rare treat, rationed to bolster the twins' strength. The meal is quiet, the fires crackle and the wind's low moan, the only sounds beyond your soft voices. The afternoon drifts on, the snow still falling, its flakes hissing against the thatch. You teach Agnes to braid rushes into a mat, her fingers clumsy but learning, the grassy scent a faint echo of summer. The twins whittle sticks into crude shapes, their chatter of snowbound heroes filling the air. Thomas checks the stall, ensuring the cow and pig have enough hay, their warmth a steady presence in the cottage's gloom. You spin wool by the firelight, the spindle's soft whir a soothing rhythm, while the hams in the chimney nook cure slowly, their smoky tang a promise of sustenance. Each task, small and repetitive, weaves a thread of endurance, holding the cold at bay as dusk falls. The sky a seamless gray beyond the snow, you sup on the last of the pottage, stretched with a handful of dried peas. The children, weary now, curl by the hearth, their eyes heavy as you tell a tale of a winter when the village dug a path to the church, their prayers answered with a traveler's gift of grain. The story, rooted in the village's memory, lulls them toward sleep, their breaths sinking with the fire's pulse. Thomas banks the hearth, the peat's glow lingering, while you mend a final stitch. The needles tug a quiet anchor in the night, its fire and walls a refuge, but the snow's weight grows heavier, the paths to neighbors and stores buried deeper. As you settle onto the pallet, the blanket heavy with smoke and frost, a question lingers in the fire's fading glow. When the storm relents and the paths emerge. What hidden tolls will the snow have carved in the village's fragile bonds? Rationing shadows, the slow drain of grain stores you stir in the dim chill of your Cuxham cottage. The air heavy with the scent of peat smoke and the faint, lingering warmth of the animals in their stall. It is early February 1348, and the snow outside has settled into a hard, crusted blanket, its surface glinting like polished bone under a weak sun. The thatch overhead creaks faintly, the weight of the drifts easing as the wind sculpts them into ridges. You rise from the straw pallet, the woolen blanket stiff with frost, and pull on your kirtle, its fibers cold and coarse against your skin. Your turn shoes, patched and worn, slip onto your feet, the leather damp from yesterday's brief thaw. The hearth's embers pulse faintly, a fragile heartbeat against the winter's grip, and you add a peat turf, its dense smoke curling upward as the fire sparks to life, casting a soft glow across the packed earth floor. Today your task is to ration the dwindling stores, a careful accounting of grain and provisions as the winter stretches long. The fire's crackle is a steady companion, its warmth vital as you move through the cottage's small space. Thomas rises, his breath clouding as he rubs warmth into his scarred hands, while Agnes and the twins stir beneath the blanket, their soft breaths mingling with the cows lowing in the stall. The pig grunts softly, rooting in the straw, its bulk a promise for next autumn's slaughter. The manorial records of Cuxham kept in the Lord's Hall note the lean year's winters when grain ran low and fines were levied for hoarding beyond the tithe. The chronicles of Oxford whisper of the great famine of 1315 to 1317, when stores failed and villages turned to desperation. A shadow that looms in every handful of grain you measure. You begin by checking the stores in the barn, the path to it freshly shoveled after the storms relent. The snow crunches underfoot, its icy bite seeping through your shoes as you push open the barn door, its hinges creaking in the cold. Inside, the air smells of dry straw and the faint, nutty scent of grain. The sacks, once heavy with barley and rye from the autumn gleaning, now sag, their contents barely a quarter full. You lift the clay pot's lid, the barley kernels hard and sparse, their weight light in your palm. The rye, coarser and darker, is even less, and the oats reserved for the ox and car, a scant handful. The apples, dried into leathery rings, hang in a net by the rafters, their number dwindling, while a small crock of lard and a few strips of bacon remain from the slaughter, their smoky tang a precious reserve. Back in the cottage, you measure the day's grain with a wooden scoop, its handle worn smooth by years of use. A handful of barley goes into the iron pot for pottage, mixed with a pinch of dried peas and a single parsnip root, its woody scent faint but familiar. The pot simmers over the fire, its steam curling in the chill air, and you stir it slowly. The wooden spoons soft scrape a rhythm against the hearth's crackle. Thomas, his hands steady, checks the hams in the chimney nook, their surfaces dark and firm from weeks of smoking, and slices a thin strip of bacon to flavor the broth, its fat sizzling in the skillet. The children, awake now, watch with hungry eyes. Agnes, helping to knead a small loaf of rye, its dough heavy and gray from the coarse flour. The twins, restless, sort through the kindling pile, their small hands stacking twigs to keep the fire fed. Rationing is a silent arithmetic. Each meal a balance between hunger and endurance. You calculate the days ahead, knowing February's cold will linger and March may bring no relief. The cow's milk, thinner now, is reserved for the children, a cup each to strengthen their bones, while you and Thomas sip small beer, its sour edge cutting the pottage's blandness. The rye loaf, baked in the clay oven by the hearth, emerges dense and hard, its crust cracking with a faint, nutty scent. You slice it thin, saving half for tomorrow, and crumble a piece into the pottage, stretching the meal's weight. The manorial customs, etched in the court rolls, demand a tithe of grain for the church, but your stores are too lean for more than a token offering, a prayer whispered over a single scoop. Still half buried in snow, shares this quiet struggle. Widow Marjorie, her granary nearly empty, sends her grandson with a small bundle of dried herbs, thyme and sage for your pottage, traded for a sliver of bacon. John the miller, his mill slowed by the frozen stream, offers a handful of brand for kindling, his voice gruff but kind as he speaks of his own thinning stores. The reeve, Robert, makes his rounds again, his limp slower in the snow, his tally stick noting the village's provisions accustomed to guard against famine, though his eyes soften at the sight of your careful measures. The chronicles recall winters when neighbors shared their last grains, binding the community through hunger, and you hold to that hope, knowing Marjorie's herbs and John's bran are threads in the village's weave dot by midday. The pottage is ready, ladled into wooden bowls, its warmth. The children eat slowly, dipping their rye bread into the broth, its dense chew softened by the heat. Thomas sips his beer, his eyes on the fire, while you share a cup of warmed milk, its creamy richness a rare bolster. The meal is sparse but shared, the fire's glow knitting you closer as you eat. Agnes tells a small story of a squirrel she saw hoarding nuts, her voice soft, while the twins argue over who can stack the kindling higher. The fire's crackle fills the pauses, its warmth a fragile shield against the chill seeping through the walls. The afternoon brings more small tasks. You mend a sack, its seams frayed, the bone needle tugging through coarse hemp. Thomas sharpens a knife, its blade rasping against the whetstone, while the children play with a straw doll, their giggles a faint warmth in the gloom. You check the barn again, counting the days the grain might last, each kernel a prayer against hunger. The cow's hay baled in summer is thinning too, and you ration it carefully, her lowing a quiet plea in the stall. The fire, fed sparingly, burns low, its smoke curling around the hams, their scent a promise you guard closely as dusk falls, the sky a pale gray streaked with clouds. You sup on the last of the pottage, stretched with a leek's sharp bite. The children, weary now, curl by the hearth, their eyes heavy as you murmur a tale of a winter when a single sack of grain saved a village, its kernels counted like gold, their breaths slow, lulled by the fire's pulse, while Thomas banks the hearth, the peat's glow lingering. You spin wool by its light, the spindle's soft whir a thread in the night's quiet. The cottage holds fast, its stores rationed with care, but the grain's slow drain casts long shadows. As you settle onto the pallet, the blanket heavy with smoke and frost, a question lingers in the fire's fading glow. When the last kernels fall and the snow still holds. What new measures will the hungering days demand? Herbal whispers, remedies from root and bark you awaken to the faint crackle of the hearth in your Cuxham cottage, the air heavy with the scent of peat smoke and the musky warmth of the animals in their stall. It is mid-February 1348, and the winter's grip remains unyielding, though the snow outside has settled into a hard crust, glinting under a pale sun that offers little warmth. The thatch overhead creaks softly, its frost-laden weight easing as a brief thaw softens the drifts. You rise from the straw pallet, the woolen blanket, stiff with cold, and pull on your kirtle. Its coarse fibers chilled against your skin. Your turn shoes, patched and damp, slip onto your feet, the leather creaking as you step onto the packed earth floor, where the rushes, now nearly gone, whisper faintly underfoot. The hearth's embers glow dimly, a fragile pulse, and you add a peat turf, its dense smoke curling upward as the fire sparks to life, casting a soft glow across the room today. With the paths still treacherous but passable, you turn to the quiet work of gathering and preparing herbs, the village's remedies against the ailments that winter breeds. The fire's warmth is your anchor, its crackle a steady rhythm as you move through the cottage. Thomas rises, his breath clouding as he rubs warmth into his scarred hands, while Agnes and the twins stir beneath the blanket, their soft breaths mingling with the cows lowing in the stall. The pig grunts softly, rooting in the straw, its bulk a promise for next autumn. The manorial records of Cuxham kept in the Lord's Hall note the village's reliance on herbal lore fiends for poaching roots from the Lord's wood, but also the wise woman's role in easing coughs and fevers that creep through snowbound homes. The chronicles of Oxford whisper of winters when sickness followed hunger, and you guard against it with the knowledge passed from your mother's hands. You begin by checking the small bundle of herbs hung in the rafters, their leaves dried in summer's heat and stored in a linen sack traded from Widow Marjorie. The thyme, its woody scent sharp and sage, its leaves soft and gray, are nearly spent, used sparingly in pottages to stretch flavor. You fetch a basket from the barn, its willow withs worn but sturdy, and venture out, the snow crunching underfoot as you tread the narrow path to the hedgerow. The air bites, carrying the faint scent of frozen earth and pine, and you wrap your mantle tighter, its lambskin lining thin but warm. The hedgerow, dusted with snow, hides nettle roots and elder bark, their medicinal promise buried but not lost. You dig carefully with a wooden spade, the soil hard and cold, unearthing nettle roots, their fibrous tang a remedy for the twins' winter coughs, and strips of elder bark boiled to ease fevers. As the wise woman taught you, back in the cottage, you spread the roots and bark on a cloth by the hearth, their earthy scents mingling with the fire's smoke. You crush the nettles with a pestle, their sting long gone, and steep them in a clay pot with warmed water, the liquid turning a faint green as it simmers. The elder bark, peeled into thin strips, joins a second pot, its bitter aroma rising as it softens. Thomas, his hands steady, grinds a handful of dried yarrow from the summer's harvest, its peppery scent a balm for cuts and chills, while Agnes helps rinse the nettle roots, her small hands careful to avoid the pot's heat. The twins, restless, sort through the herb bundle, their fingers brushing the sage's soft leaves as they chatter about the wise woman's tales of healing spirits in the wood. The village shares this work, its herbal lore a communal thread. Widow Marjorie, her knowledge deep from years of tending the sick, sends her grandson with a small pouch of dried mint, traded for a cup of your nettle broth, its warmth easing her aching joints. John the miller, his cough lingering from the cold, stops by with a handful of brand for kindling, his voice hoarse as he asks for a pinch of yarrow paste. The reeve, Robert, limps through the thawing paths, his tally stick noting the village's health accustomed to guard against plague. As the chronicles recall winters when fever swept through snowbound homes, you share a small vial of elder broth with him, his nod a quiet thanks, knowing the village's strength lies in these exchanges. By midday, the remedies are ready, the nettle broth strained into a stone crock, its grassy warmth a comfort for the twins' coughs. The elder bark tea, bitter but soothing, steams in a wooden cup, shared sparingly to ease Thomas's winter aches. You prepare a sparse meal, a pottage of barley and a single leek, its sharp bite softened by a pinch of sage, the broth's steam curling in the chill air. The rye bread, now 4 days old, is hard but dipped in the pottage, its dense chew a quiet sustenance. The children eat slowly, their cheeks flushed by the fire, while you sip small beer, its sour edge familiar. Thomas shares a tale of a winter when the wise woman cured a fever with willow bark, his voice low and steady, lulling the twins as they sip their nettle broth. The afternoon brings finer tasks. You mix yarrow with lard, forming a thick paste for cuts, its sharp scent clinging to your fingers. Thomas repairs a wooden spoon, its handle cracked from use, while Agnes learns to braid herbs into small bundles for drying, her fingers clumsy but earnest. The twins, their coughs softer now, play with a straw doll, their giggles a faint warmth in the gloom. The fire, fed sparingly with the last of the kindling, burns low, its smoke curling around the hams in the chimney nook, their woody tang a promise of sustenance. Each task, small and deliberate, weaves a thread of resilience, guarding against the ailments winter brings. As dusk falls, the sky a pale violet streaked with clouds. You sup on the last of the pottage, stretched with a handful of dried peas. The children, weary now, curl by the hearth, their eyes heavy as you murmur a tale of a healer who saved a village with a single root, her knowledge a light in the dark. Their breaths slow, lulled by the fire's pulse, while Thomas banks the hearth, the peat's glow lingering. You spin wool by its light, the spindle's soft whir a thread in the night's quiet weave. The cottage holds fast, its remedies a fragile shield against sickness. But the stores dwindle, and the cold lingers. As you settle onto the pallet, a question whispers in the fire's fading glow. When the herbs run low and the winter's ailments deepen, what hidden strengths will the village need to summon? Bonds in the blizzard, village hands joined you awaken to the sharp stillness of a mid-February morning in 1348. The air in your Cuxham cottage, thick with the scent of peat smoke and the faint warmth of the animals in their stall. The snow outside has hardened into a brittle crust, but a fresh blizzard stirs, its low howl rattling the shutters and piling new drifts against the wattle-and-daub walls. The thatch overhead groans softly, its frost-laden weight tested by the wind. You rise from the straw pallet, the woolen blanket stiff with cold, and pull on your kirtle, its coarse fibers chilled against your skin, where the last rushes crunch faintly underfoot. The hearth's embers glow dimly, a fragile pulse, and you add a peat turf, its dense smoke curling upward as the fire flickers to life, casting a soft glow across the room. Today, the blizzard binds you to the village, its fury demanding shared effort to keep paths clear and hearths burning. The fire's crackle is a steady anchor, its warmth vital as you prepare for the communal labor that winter demands. Thomas rises, his breath clouding as he rubs warmth into his scarred hands, while Agnes and the twins stir beneath the blanket, their soft breaths mingling with the cows lowing in the stall. The pig grunts, rooting in the straw, its bulk a promise for next autumn. The manorial records of Cuxham, kept in the Lord's Hall, note these moments of unity when blizzards forced villagers to dig paths to the church or share dwindling stores. Fines waived for those who aided their neighbors. The chronicles of Oxford recall winters when communities survived by joining hands, their bonds stronger than the snows. Wait, you begin by checking the cottage's stores. The barley and rye sacks in the barn now dangerously light, their kernels counted like coins. The fire must be fed sparingly, the woodpile thin, and you ration a single log, its woody scent mingling with the peat's earthiness. Thomas, his hands steady, sharpens a wooden shovel for digging, its blade worn from clearing the yard's drifts. You wrap your mantle tight, its lambskin lining thin but warm, and venture out with him, the snow stinging your face as you shovel a path to the barn. The air bites, carrying the faint scent of frozen earth, and the wind howls, piling snow against the door. Agnes helps sweep the hearth, her small hands scattering ash, while the twins, bundled in their smocks, carry kindling inside, their cheeks flushed as they dodge the storm's gusts. The village calls for aid, its paths buried and hearths at risk. You and Thomas join the effort, trudging through the drifts to the churchyard, where neighbors gather with shovels and brooms. Widow Marjorie, her strength waning, stays by her hearth, but sends her grandson with a small sack of dried apples, traded for your help in clearing her path. John the miller, his broad frame bent against the wind, leads a group digging toward the common well, its water frozen but vital. The reeve, Robert, limps through the snow, his tally stick unused today, his voice hoarse as he directs the work, a rare softness in his eyes. The air carries the crunch of shovels and the low murmur of prayers. The village bound by the shared labor of survival. By midday, the path to the church is cleared, its stone tower a beacon through the blizzard's haze. You pause to eat, huddling in the church's nave, where Father Elias keeps a fire burning, its warmth a communal gift. The meal is spars a pottage of oats and a single leek shared from a neighbor's pot. The rye bread, hard and stale, is softened in the broth, its dense chew a quiet sustenance. The children sip small beer, their eyes wide as they listen to the miller's tale of a winter when the village dug a path to save a stranded traveler. Thomas shares a cup of warmed milk from Bess, its creamy richness a bolster against the storm, while you offer a pinch of nettle broth to a coughing neighbor, its grassy warmth easing her breath. The afternoon brings more digging, the snow relentless, piling faster than you can clear. You work beside Thomas, your shovel scraping the frozen crust, the cold numbing your hands through woolen mittens. The twins, too young for heavy labor, carry kindling to the church, their laughter muffled by the wind, while Agnes helps Marjorie's grandson sweep snow from doorways. The village moves as one, each shovel's crunch a thread in the weave of survival. The chronicles speak of winters when such bonds held fast, like in 1340, when Cuxham shared its last grain to feed the weak, a mercy noted in the manor's rolls. You feel that strength now, the shared effort warming you more than the fire. As dusk falls, the sky a swirling gray, you return to the cottage. The path to the barn, clear but filling fast. Supper is a thin broth of bacon bones and dried peas, its warmth a faint comfort as you huddle by the hearth. The children, weary from the day, curl close, their eyes heavy as you tell a tale of a village that survived a blizzard by sharing a single loaf, its crumbs a sacrament of unity. Their breaths slow, lulled by the fire's pulse, while Thomas banks the hearth, the peat's glow lingering. You mend a torn mitten, the bone needle tugging through wool, its rhythm a quiet anchor in the storm's howl. The cottage holds fast, its warmth sustained by the village's shared hands. But the blizzard's fury grows, the snow piling higher. As you settle onto the pallet, a question lingers in the fire's fading glow. When the storm's full weight descends, what deeper bonds will the village need to forge to endure the cold's unyielding grasp? The longest night, solstice prayers, for dawn you awaken to the profound stillness of the winter solstice in 1348. The air in your Cuxham cottage, heavy with the scent of peat smoke and the faint, musky warmth of the animals in their stall. It is late February, though the days blur under the weight of snow that blankets the village, its crust glinting faintly under a moonless sky. The thatch overhead creaks softly, burdened by fresh drifts, and the wattle-and-daub walls, patched and repatched, hold firm against the cold's probing fingers. You rise from the straw pallet, the woolen blanket stiff with frost, and pull on your kirtle, its coarse fibers chilled against your skin. Your turn shoes worn and patched, creak as you step onto the packed earth floor, where the last rushes whisper faintly underfoot. The hearth's embers glow dimly, a fragile pulse in the longest night, and you add a peat turf, its dense smoke curling upward as the fire sparks to life, casting a soft glow across the room. Tonight, the village gathers in the church for the solstice vigil, a ritual of prayers and shared warmth to mark the year's darkest hour and plead for the sun's return. The fire's crackle is your anchor as you prepare, its warmth vital in the cottage's chill. Thomas rises, his breath clouding as he rubs warmth into his scarred hands, while Agnes and the twins stir beneath the blanket, their soft breaths mingling with the cows lowing in the stall. The pig grunts, rooting in the straw, its bulk a quiet promise for next autumn. The manorial records of Cuxham, kept in the Lord's Hall. Note these gatherings moments when the village unites in faith and fire, fines waived for those who join in prayer. The chronicles of Oxford speak of solstices past, when villagers lit beacons to call back the light, their prayers a thread of hope against the dark. You begin by preparing for the vigil, wrapping the children in their woolen smocks and mantles, their lambskin linings thin but warm. You fetch a small bundle of kindling from the barn, the snow crunching underfoot as you tread the cleared path, the air biting with the scent of frozen earth and pine. The kindling twigs gathered by the twins will feed the church's fire, a communal offering to warm the nave. Back in the cottage, you stir the pottage pot, a thin broth of barley and dried peas, its steam curling faintly in the cold air. A pinch of sage, traded from Widow Marjorie, adds a woody warmth, and you crumble a sliver of bacon fat into the mix, its smoky tang, a rare gift for the solstice meal. Thomas carves a small wooden cross, its oak grain smooth from his knife, a token to lay at the church altar as custom demands. The children, awake now, help pack a basket with the pottage pot and a hard rye loaf, its crust cracked from yesterday's baking. Agnes ties a cloth over the pot, her small hands careful, while the twins chatter about the church's candles, their glow a promise in the dark. You wrap a scarf around your neck, its wool scratchy but warm, and lead the family through the snow, the path to the church barely visible under fresh drifts. The village moves with you, a slow procession through the white silence, lanterns flickering like stars in the gloom. Widow Marjorie, supported by her grandson, joins the line, her shawl dusted with snow, while John, the miller, his broad frame hunched against the wind, carries a sack of bran for the church fire. The reeve, Robert, limps at the rear, his tally stick tucked away, his voice soft as he murmurs a prayer for the village's endurance. In the church, the nave is a haven of warmth, its stone walls lit by rushlights and a central fire tended by Father Elias. The air smells of tallow, smoke, and damp wool, the villagers' breaths clouding as they kneel on the cold floor. You add your kindling to the fire, its flames flaring briefly, and place the wooden cross on the altar, its weight a quiet offering. The pottage is shared, ladled into wooden bowls, passed hand to hand, its warmth spreading through chilled fingers. The rye bread, broken into small pieces, is dipped in the broth, its dense chew a communal sustenance. The children huddle close, their eyes reflecting the candlelight, while Thomas whispers a prayer for spring, his voice low and steady. Father Elias leads the vigil, his voice a monotone chant that weaves through the fire's crackle, intoning St. Lucy's litany for light and strength. The villagers join their voices, a soft murmur, praying for the sun's return and the field's renewal. You think of the chronicles, which speak of solstices when prayers turn despair to hope, like in 1340, when Cuxham's harvest followed a vigil's grace. Agnes, her hands clasped, whispers a prayer for Bess, the cow, while the twins, their coughs softened by nettle broth, giggle at a candle's flicker. The fire's warmth binds you, its glow a promise against the longest night's wait. By midnight, the vigil ends, the prayers fading into silence as the fire burns low. You trudge home through the snow, the children sleepy but warm, their hands clutching yours. The cottage welcomes you with the hearth's faint glow, and you sup on the last of the pottage, its flavor stretched with a leek's sharp bite. The children curl by the fire, their eyes heavy, as you tell a tale of a solstice when the sun returned early, its light breaking through a blizzard to warm a frozen village, their breaths slow, lulled by the fire's pulse, while Thomas banks the hearth, the peat's glow lingering. You spin wool by its light, the spindle's soft whir, a thread in the night's quiet weave. The cottage holds fast, its warmth sustained by the village's prayers. But the solstice marks the winter's deepest point. As you settle onto the pallet, the blanket heavy with smoke and frost, a question lingers in the fire's fading glow. As the nights begin to shorten, what fragile hopes will the dawn's first light reveal? Thaw's first murmur, cracks in the frozen value stir in the tentative light of an early March morning in 1348. The air in your Cuxham cottage, carrying a subtle shift, the faint, mineral temps of melting snow mingling with the familiar peat smoke from the hearth. The winter has lingered, its snows compacted into a stubborn crust outside. But the first thaw whispers through, softening the edges of the drifts and sending faint drips from the thatch overhead. You rise from the straw pallet, the woolen blanket heavy with the night's damp, and pull on your kirtle, its fibers less stiff now, warmed by your body's heat, your turn shoes patched and softened by the moisture. Slip onto your feet, the leather yielding with a quiet sigh as you step onto the packed earth floor, where the last rushes, sodden and dark, cling to the surface. The hearth's embers glow faintly, a steady pulse through the season's end, and you add a peat turf, its dense smoke curling lazily upward as the fire awakens, casting a soft, watery glow across the room. Today marks the thaw's first murmur, a fragile promise that draws you outside to assess the land's awakening and prepare for the mud and flood that follow. The fire's crackle, softer now in the rising damp, is your anchor as you move through the cottage. Thomas rises, his breath less clouded in the milder air, his scarred hands flexing as he stretches against the lingering ache in his joints. Agnes and the twins stir beneath the blanket, their soft breaths quicker now, laced with the energy of spring's approach, mingling with the cow's contented lowing in the stall. The pig roots deeper in the straw, its grunts a rhythmic undercurrent, its bulk fattened enough on winter scraps to promise next year's slaughter. The manorial records of Cuxham kept in the Lord's Hall note these transitional days when thaws brought both relief and peril. Fields turning to quagmires that drowned unwary carts, and the reeves fines for neglected dikes. The chronicles of Oxford recall the spring of 1316, when meltwaters flooded the Thames Valley, washing away stores and seeding famine's return. You begin by tending the hearth, sweeping the ash with a bundle of twigs, its powdery scent sharp but fleeting in the damp air. The chimney nook, where the last hams hang, releases a faint, woody tang as you check their firmness, slicing a thin rasher to flavor the morning's pottage. The stores are perilously loath, barley sack nearly empty, its kernels scooped with a trembling hand, mixed with the final handful of dried peas and a wilted leek from the garden's edge. The pot simmers over the fire, its steam heavier now, carrying the earthy promise of renewal. Thomas checks the stall, forking fresh straw for the cow and pig. The hay's faded, grassy scent, a faint herald of meadows to come. Agnes helps kindle the fire higher, her small hands steady as she adds twigs, while the twins, their coughs faded with the nettle broth, peer out the window slits, pointing to the first dark rivulets snaking through the snow, stepping outside. The yard yields underfoot, the snow's crust cracking like thin ice, releasing a chill slush that soaks your shoes. The air smells of wet earth and decay, the faint rot of winter's leavings, unearthed by the thaw. You survey the garden plot, its raised beds, sodden but stirring, the first green shoots of chives pushing through the mud like timid fingers. The river beyond the fields murmurs louder, its banks softened, and you listen for the familiar trickle that signals the melt's advance. Thomas joins you, his wooden spade in hand, and together you probe the dike that guards the cottage from flood. Its clay banks, cracked but holding, packed with last autumn's dung. The work is slow, your hands numbing in the damp as you reinforce the edges with willow stakes, their sappy scent rising as you drive them deep. The children trail behind, Agnes carrying a basket of peat scraps for the fire, the twins splashing in shallow puddles, their laughter a bright note against the gray sky. The village stirs with the same cautious hope, the paths between cottages turning to mire, their surfaces pocked with boot prints and cart ruts. Widow Marjorie, her step surer now, waves from her door, offering a small twist of dried mint for your pottage, traded for a sliver of ham, her eyes brighter, the winter's toll easing from her frame. John the miller, his mill wheel groaning back to life as the stream swells, calls across the yard with a sack of coarse bran, his voice carrying the gruff warmth of survival shared. The reeve Robert limps through the mud, his tally stick notched for the thaws, duties clearing ditches and mending bridges before the floods rise. The air carries the sounds of the village awakening, the splash of spades in sodden earth, the low calls of neighbors coordinating labor, the distant toll of the church bell marking terse. The manorial customs bind you here in the shared toil of spring's edge, where one family's breached dike could flood the fields below by midday. The dike holds firm, and you pause to eat, seated on a bench by the hearth, the pottage ladled steaming into bowls. The broth, thickened with the ham's fat, carries a subtle richness, its warmth spreading through you like a quiet assurance. The rye bread, baked fresh from the last flour, is softer now, its dense crumb yielding to your teeth, dipped in the steam to capture every flavor. The children share a cup of milk from Bess, her yield increasing with the milder days. Its creamy Thames-a-bomb after months of sparsity. Thomas sips small beer, its sour edge mellowed by the thaw's damp, and speaks softly of the fields, how the fallow plot will soon need turning for wheat. Agnes recounts a dream of blooming hedgerows, her voice gaining strength, while the twins mimic the river's gurgle, their play a spark of life in the cottage's hush. The afternoon brings the first venture to the fields, the snow receding to reveal the stubble of winter barley, its pale stalks bent but unbroken. You and Thomas walk the strips, the mud sucking at your shoes, testing the soil's readiness with a finger-pressed deep cold still, but softening, its loamy scent rising like a breath held too long. The open fields stretch wide, divided by ancient furrows, each family's plot marked by boundary stones, now half sunk in slush. You note the first cracks in the frozen veil, a robin's call threading the air, its trill faint but insistent, the distant bleat of ewes in the common meadow, their lambs stirring within. The children scamper along the edges, gathering the first wild green dandelion leaves, their bitter tang a promise for salads when the stores give out. Yet peril lingers, the river's swell laps higher, and you eye the manor's great dike, its breaches a threat to the barley yet to sprout. As the light fades, the sky a pale wash of gray and gold. You return to the cottage, the mud trailing from your hem. Supper is a simple affair. The pottage stretched with early chives, their green sharpness cutting the blandness. The children, mud-streaked and weary, curl by the hearth, their eyes heavy as you tell a tale of a thaw that brought flood and feast in equal measure. The village, saved by timely dikes and shared seed, their breaths slow, lulled by the fire's pulse and the drip of meltwater outside. While Thomas banks the hearth, the peat's glow lingering softer now. You spin wool by its light. The spindles were blending with the river's murmur, a thread in the evening's gentle unraveling. The cottage holds fast, its walls and stores a testament to endurance. But the thaw's cracks reveal the land's fragility. As you settle onto the pallet, the blanket heavy with damp and the scent of earth reborn, a question lingers in the fire's fading glow as the ice yields and the waters rise. What hidden renewals will the spring's first flood unearth? You stir in the gradual light of an early March morning in 1348, the air in your Cuxham cottage carrying a subtle shift of faint dampness, mingling with the familiar scent of peat smoke and the animals' musky warmth in their stall. The snow outside, once a heavy shroud, has begun to soften, its crust yielding to a weak sun that filters through the oiled parchment over the window slits, casting watery patterns on the packed turf floor. The thatch overhead drips sporadically, the frozen weight easing as the first thaw murmurs through the village. You rise from the straw pallet, the woolen blanket less stiff now, though still heavy with the winter's damp. Your turn shoes, patched and worn, slip onto your feet, the leather yielding as you step onto the floor, where the last rushes, sodden and dark, cling to the earth. Today, the thaw's first signs demand inspection, a careful tending to the land and home as winter's veil begins to crack. The hearth's embers glow faintly, a steady pulse after months of vigilant feeding. And you add a handful of kindling, the dry twigs snapping less crisply now, their faint piney scent blending with the peat's earthiness and the emerging must of melting snow. Thomas rises, his breath less clouded in the milder air, his scarred hands flexing as he stretches, while Agnes and the twins stir beneath the blanket, their soft breaths syncing with the cows, contented. The pig roots in the straw, its grunts, a rhythmic. The manorial records of Cuxham, kept in the Lord's Hall, note these transitional days when thaws brought floods or mud that bogged carts, but also the promise of ploughing, with fines for neglecting the fallow fields. The chronicles of Oxford speak of marches past, like 1340, when early thaws swelled the Thames, turning paths to mire, but heralding spring's renewal. You step outside. The yard, a slushy expanse, where snow melts into puddles, their surfaces rippling under a gentle breeze that carries the scent of wet earth and budding willow. The air tastes milder, less sharp with ice, though the cold lingers in the shadows. You check the cottage walls, the wattle-and-daub holding firm but slick with moisture. The willow weaves you mended in January now glistening. Thomas joins you, his shovel in hand, to clear the melting drifts from the door. The snow heavy and wet as it falls away, revealing the mud beneath. The children, awake now, venture out in their smocks, their boots splashing in the puddles. Agnes, pointing to the first green shoots pushing through the garden's frozen soil leeks and parsnips, their tops frail but alive. The The twins chase a rivulet of meltwater toward the river path, their laughter a brighter note in the thawing hush. The thaw reveals the land's scars, the open fields beyond the yard, a patchwork of slush and mud where the three-field system waits. The fallow plot, manured in autumn, now shows faint cracks in the frozen soil, a sign to prepare for plowing when the ground firms. You and Thomas inspect the hedgerows, their branches dripping, and gather the first wild green's dandelion leaves, their bitter temps a harbinger of spring salads and early sorrel, its lemony sharpness a remedy for the winter's pallor. The river's edge, once rhymed with ice, now murmurs with cracks, thin lines fracturing the surface like veins in marble, releasing a faint mineral scent as water flows freer. The manorial court rolls recount thaws that flooded the lowlands, drowning stores or washing away dikes. But you recall your mother's tales of careful checks, the probing of soil with a stick to test its readiness, the mending of sluices before the melt swelled. The village stirs with the same quiet urgency, the air carrying the splash of boots and the low voices of neighbors. Widow Marjorie, her steps steadier now, calls from her doorway, offering a handful of her own sorrel in trade for a scoop of your barley, her eyes brighter with the thaw's promise. John the miller, his mill wheel groaning as the stream quickens, stops by with a sack of fresh ground rye, its nutty scent a luxury after months of coarse flour, traded for your help in clearing his path. The reeve, Robert, limps through the mud, his tally stick notched for the season's shift, directing the mending of common dikes to hold back the flood. The bonds forged in the blizzard hold, the village moving as one to harness the thaw's gifts before its risks mud that clings to plows. Rivers that swell to breach banks. By midday, you prepare a meal touched by the new season, a pottage of the first greens and remaining oats, its vibrant bitterness cutting the winter's blandness as it simmers over the fire. The broth steams, carrying the sorrel's tang, and you add a sliver of bacon, its smoky richness a fading echo of autumn. The rye loaf, baked with John's fresh flour, emerges lighter, its crust golden and yielding, a small celebration. You eat by the hearth, the family gathered close, the children dipping their bread into the pottage, their cheeks pink with the mild air. Thomas sips small beer, its sour edge softened by the greens, while you share warmed milk from Bess, her yield increasing with the thaw's feed of fresh hay. Agnes recounts the solstice vigil, her voice soft, while the twins splash imaginary puddles in their tails. The afternoon brings tasks of preparation. You mend the garden fence, its willow stakes softened by the melt, while Thomas checks the ox's harness, the leather supple now in the damp. The children scatter seeds in a small plot piece for the coming weeks, their tiny forms pressed into the mud with careful fingers. The river's cracks widen, the ice groaning like distant thunder, and you watch from the bank, the waters flow, a soothing murmur. The fire in the cottage burns lower, the woodpile spared as the cold eases, its flames dancing shadows across the walls, now free of frost as dusk falls. The sky, a soft gray, streaked with the first hints of blue. You sup on the last of the pottage, stretched with dandelion greens. The children, weary from the day's explorations, curl by the hearth, their eyes heavy as you tell a tale of a thaw that brought a bountiful spring, its floods receding to reveal fertile soil. Their breaths slow, lulled by the fire's pulse and the drip of melting snow outside. While Thomas banks the hearth, the peat's glow lingering, you spin wool by its light. The spindle's soft whir, a thread in the evening's gentle weave. The cottage holds fast, its warmth easing with the thaw's murmur, but the cracks in the frozen veil hint at changes yet to come. As you settle onto the pallet, the blanket heavy with damp and the scent of earth, a question lingers in the fire's fading glow. When the ice fully breaks and spring's full rush arrives, what renewed labors will the awakening land demand? Spring's gentle return, seeds of renewal and rescue awaken to the soft patter of rain on the thatch, a gentle rhythm that fills your Cuxham cottage with the scent of wet earth and the faint, lingering warmth of the hearth. It is mid-March 1348, and the thaw has fully broken winter's grip. The snow reduced to scattered patches that gleam like fading memories in the fields. The air carries a new lightness, infused with the green promise of budding willow and the distant murmur of the River Thames, swollen but steady. You rise from the straw pallet, the woolen blanket, now soft with the damp of spring, and pull on your kirtle, its fibers less coarse in the milder air. Your turn shoes, patched but pliable, slip onto your feet, the leather yielding as you step onto the packed earth floor, where fresh rushes, gathered from the riverbank, release a grassy scent underfoot. The hearth's embers glow softly, their heat less urgent now, and you add a small log, its woody fragrance blending with the peat's fading smoke as the fire sparks to life, casting a gentle glow across the room. Today marks the true return of spring, a season of sowing and renewal that calls you to the fields and binds the village in shared labor. The fire's crackle, softer in the damp air, is a quiet anchor as you prepare for the day. Thomas rises, his breath no longer clouding, his scarred hands flexing with renewed purpose, while Agnes and the twins leap from the blanket, their voices bright with the season's energy, mingling with the cows contented lowing in the stall. The pig, fattened through winter, grunts softly, its bulk a promise for next autumn's slaughter. The manorial records of Cuxham, kept in the Lord's Hall, note this time of turning when the three-field system demands plowing and planting, fines levied for late sowing, but also mercies granted for shared seed. The Chronicles of Oxford recall springs like 1345, when timely rains brought bountiful harvests, a hope that lingers in the village's collective memory. You begin by preparing a meal to sustain the day's work, stirring a pottage of the last barley and fresh dandelion greens, their bitter tang, a vibrant note of spring. The pot simmers over the fire, its steam curling with the scent of early chives plucked from the garden's awakening beds. Thomas slices a thin rasher of bacon, its smoky richness a final gift from the autumn slaughter, and you crumble it into the broth, saving the fat for tomorrow's cooking. Agnes kneads a small loaf of rye, using the last of John the Miller's fresh ground flour, its nutty scent rising as it bakes in the clay oven by the hearth. The twins, eager for the fields, fetch a jug of small beer, its sour edge softened by the season's mildness, while you reserve a cup of Bess's milk for them, her yield now steady with the fresh hay of spring. Outside, the village hums with life, the fields a patchwork of mud and sprouting green, where the fallow plot awaits the plow. You and Thomas join the communal effort, trudging to the open fields, the earth yielding underfoot with a soft squelch, its loamy scent rising like a prayer. The ox, strong from winter's care, pulls the plow, its wooden blade cutting furrows through the soil, guided by Thomas's steady hand. You follow, scattering wheat seeds from a linen sack, their tiny forms sinking into the earth with a whispered promise of harvest. Agnes and the twins trail behind, pressing the seeds deeper with small sticks, their laughter mingling with the calls of robins threading through the hedgerows. The air carries the sounds of the village at work, the creak of plows, the low chants of laborers keeping time, the distant toll of the church bell marking noon. The village binds together in this labor, its bonds forged through winter now blossoming in spring. Widow Marjorie, her strength returning, brings a handful of her own seeds peas, her smile warm as she scatters them beside you. John the miller, his mill humming with the swollen stream, offers a sack of coarse flour for the village's shared sowing, his voice gruff but bright with the season's hope. The reeve, Robert, limps through the fields, his tally stick notched for the sown acres, his eyes softer now, noting the village's unity rather than its debts. The manorial customs hold here in the shared plows and seeds, a weave of resilience that echoes the chronicle's tales of springs when communities rebuilt after famine's shadow by midday. The first furrows are sown, and you pause to eat in the field, seated on a boundary stone. The pottage ladled into wooden bowls, its warmth spreading through chilled hands. The rye loaf, fresh and golden, breaks easily, its crumb soft and nutty, dipped in the broth to savor every bite. The children share a cup of milk, their cheeks pink with exertion, while Thomas sips small beer, his gaze on the fields, speaking softly of the harvest to come. Agnes points to a lark soaring above, its song a bright thread in the air, while the twins chase a butterfly, its wings a flicker of spring's promise. The meal is simple but abundant in hope. The earth's awakening, a quiet celebration after winter's trials. The afternoon brings more sowing, the wheat seeds joined by peas and beans, their planting a rhythm of renewal. You mend a torn sack by the field's edge, the bone needle tugging through hemp, while Thomas sharpens the plow's blade, its iron glinting in the weak sun. The children gather wild green sorrel and early nettles for tomorrow's pottage, their baskets heavy with spring's first bounty. The river, now a steady flow, mirrors the sky's growing blue, its banks green with new grass. The cottage, when you return, feels lighter, its walls no longer pressed by snow, the hearth's fire burning low as the air warms as dusk falls. The sky a soft wash of gold and violet, you sup by the hearth, the pottage bright with greens, its flavor a herald of spring. The children, weary from the fields, curl close, their eyes heavy as you tell a tale of a village that sowed after a flood, its harvest feeding generations. Their breaths slow, lulled by the fire's gentle pulse and the rain's soft patter outside, while Thomas banks the hearth, the peat's glow fading into the evening's warmth. You spin wool by its light, the spindle's soft whir, a final thread in the season's weave. The cottage, a haven of renewal. The fields are sown, the village bound by shared labor, and spring's gentle return whispers of plenty. As you settle onto the pallet, the blanket, soft with the scent of earth and rain, The echoes of winter fade, replaced by the quiet rhythm of growth. The trials of frost and hunger linger in memory, but the seeds you've planted promise rest and revival. Let the echoes of history fade as you drift into rest. The earth turning softly beneath you, its pulse a lullaby of seasons renewed.